I'm the Moonlit Page Turner, and this is my second quarter reads of 2025. So these are all of the books that I read in April, May, and June of this year. I have a total of 21 reads. We're going to divide it into different categories. I have book club reads. I have fiction books. I have the category this year is banned books that has both fiction and nonfiction in it. And then we'll also talk about the nonfiction reads that are not banned in schools around the country, mostly Florida. But yeah, I read a wide range of books. Again, I get most of my books from the library. I do use the Libby app quite frequently, so I do audiobooks, ebooks, and physical books. And I'll talk about how I read each book. So if you're wondering, like, oh, where did you spend all this money to get all these books? Used and library. I did actually get a book from one of the little libraries in the neighborhoods, and so that is also a great resource. I often donate a lot of my books to them as well. So here we go. We're going to start off with book club reads. I'm in 2 book clubs. I'm in the Savvy Gaming Network's video game book club, and I will link that below. I also have the Read the World series that I read here on, I review here on YouTube. I'm behind in that. So for the Savvy Gaming Network, I have 3 titles for you. The first one I'm going to talk about is Star Wars Force Unleashed, and that is by Sean Williams. That came after the video game. It's all right. I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. I have seen all the movies. We've read a couple of the books. I've played some of the video games. So I don't know a lot of Star Wars lore, but I thought the action scenes were really good, to the fact that we actually played the game, or we started to play the game, and I feel bad because the game is a little dated. I think if they updated it, it would be a better game, but we actually found the book to be better for that. The next one is the game that we're currently playing together, Savvy and I, and that is LA Noir. And in LA Noir, you can collect magazines, short stories, and so these are supposed to be some of the short stories that are in the game. It is a collection of short stories. I think there's like 8 of them, and they are all terrible. This is a 1-star read for me. I do not recommend it at all. They took the noir category a little too seriously. It's very dark. There's a lot of violence, especially towards women in it. And I did not like a single book that they talked about. The book that surprised us was Dead Space Martyr, and this was just re-released. It used to be out of print. It just came back. The second one is also out. Technically not canon. It does take place before the first game, and if you're interested in checking this out, I do read the first part of it on Savvy Gaming Network. So again, I'll link Savvy Gaming Network below if you're interested in kind of checking it out. It is a little violent, and they do use some curse words, so that is my public service announcement for that. A little heads up on Dead Space, but it moves really quickly. There is quite a lot of characters in here, and yeah, it really surprised me because I heard some things that this was not a great book, so I think I went in with low expectations, but I ended up giving it 4 stars. For the Read the World series, I'm a little bit behind by like a country and a half, so I'm still finishing up Bulgaria, and I'm a little behind, but I'll get there. I'll make it. Last collection, the first quarter reads, I left off with Brazil. I finished the second book of Brazil, and this is Symphony in White, and this is by Adriana Lisboa. I was hugely impressed by my 2 reads from Brazil, and I am looking forward to reading more Brazilian authors. This one was super sad. You can see it's like sparkly because this is a used copy from a library. So Palo Alto City Library, I got your book. And it's, I think more people should read it. It does have to do with 2 sisters growing up in rural Brazil. There is an incident that separates them, and we get to see them grow up into their adult life. Symphony in White is the title of a painting. Not this painting, though, which is kind of weird. It is very beautifully written, super sad, but really, really good. For Brunei, I still don't know how to pronounce that. I have 2 books. One was The Witch Doctor's Daughter, and this is an ebook. I couldn't find a physical copy of it. And this is by Katharina Mood Dodd, and I really liked this book. It is a coming of age. It takes place in Brunei, and where she's kind of figuring out what to do with life, and she's fed up with her dad in particular, his swindling of people for her mom's gifts, and so she goes to the Longhouse to explore heritage, and there's not a lot of economic opportunities where she lives, and so she's kind of trying to explore what it means to be an adult and what she wants to do with life, and should she leave or should she stay. So talking about like just some of her friends. So great cultural book, like beautifully written, great story. Really, really liked it. The second read I was not so impressed with, and that is I Am Not Your Eve, and this is by Davika Ponambala. It is a really interesting book. If you are kind of into like weirder books, it's not necessarily weird, it's just like the way that it was written was a little weird. It's short vignettes. This is actually about real people. So I Am Not Your Eve is about, and I'm going to butcher her name, Tehamana, and she was the muse for Paul Gauguin, who was a French painter. He went to Tahiti where he married this young girl. She could have been 13, she could have been 15. They actually do talk about that in the book, and the author writes an article, and that in the Read the World video, that's the article that I linked in there. I was confused during most of it because, again, it's like short vignettes. It's like 2 pages, 1 page, a paragraph. You have no idea who is talking until you get further into it. So every time you get into a different section, you're like, is this Paul's perspective? Is this her perspective? Is it Paul's daughter's perspective? And then she also talks about the mythology of Tahiti. And so you get some of the folktale stories in that. It's well written. I was confused through half of it. They give you little pieces of the story, and so it was not for me. But I think if you're into different types of books, you might like it. But I did not. And then for Bolivia, I'm not at Bulgaria yet. For Bolivia, I finished Street Without a Name, and this is by Kapka Kasabova, and this is nonfiction. This is about her growing up in communism Bolivia, and it was fantastic. It's a little bit of a larger book. She goes back to Bolivia as an adult. Her and her family do leave when she's a teenager, and they live in New Zealand. She doesn't talk a lot about her time in other countries. She lives in like Scotland and Ireland and France, and so she's now a world nomad. But she goes back to Bolivia to kind of see the places as they are now that Bolivia is no longer under communism. And it's a really interesting look. She's a fantastic writer. I enjoyed it. It just, I wanted more of like her childhood, and we got to see kind of even parts of her adulthood and her childhood. But also I would have loved to see her compare her life in New Zealand to her life in Bolivia. So we don't really see that. Beautifully written. It was a great book. I just thought there were some things missing. So, and I'm currently like halfway through my second Bolivia read before I move on to the next country. So that will be in the next video. For nonfiction, I have 4 books. I do read a wide variety of books, and you might see some of that here. So these 4 books are fairly different. There is somewhat of a theme in a couple of them, but the first one I'm going to talk about is Dead Wake, and this is by Erik Larson. Erik Larson is probably best known for The Devil in the White City, where he wrote about serial killer H.H. Holmes, and The World Fair, and he takes 2 stories that are around the same time period or that have to do, and then he ends up merging them. This one I listened to through Libby on audio, and Erik Larson gives a lot of information. So at the beginning of it, it was really, really hard for me to figure out who was who and what was going on before we got a little bit further into it. Dead Wake is about the Lusitania, and the Lusitania, the sinking of the Lusitania, is the event that sparked the U.S. involvement into World War I. And so what Larson does is he takes the people that were on the Lusitania as they're traveling across, and he talks about like they could have gotten there sooner, and like all the things that could have stopped the Lusitania from being attacked by the U-boat. And then he also, the second story that he goes back and forth on are the people on the U-boat that will end up torpedoing the Lusitania. So he's a great author. I've read quite a few books from him. I learn a lot of information. I learn something new every time I read it. He got a little bit into the spiritualism aspect, which he wrote a audio-only fiction book that was excellent, that talks about spiritualism of the time. So I'm always impressed by the amount of research that he does, and he is a good writer. For me, for audio, it was just a little information overload. Another information overload on audio was Invisible Women, and that is by Caroline Criado Perez. And this is a book about the fact that women, we are about 50% of the world's population, but the world is not made for us. And she goes into a lot of information, mainly we're talking UK, US. Some of it goes into Europe, not a lot in Asia, not Australia, South America, we don't really hear that much about. But she talks about the structures that are set up for people and how they are, and how bringing not only women into that process, but bringing women into the thought process of like, oh, we have to design this system not only for the men that live and will use it, but for the women, the population of women as well. One of the things that stands out, and it is kind of one of those things that I'll think about sometimes, is one of those books that like sit with you, is we know crash test dummies for car safety mainly were men-sized dummies, and so then they just made them smaller, like child size, to test to see for women's safety, and that's not great for us because there are other differences in our bodies besides just stature and height. But they don't test the front seat. So women typically are not the ones that are driving. If there is a man and woman, typically men are driving. Women will be the passenger, like passenger princess, right? And they found when they do test for safety with a smaller person in the passenger seat, the safety rating of those vehicles, of most vehicles, goes down 40%. And so that's why they don't test those. So it's an infuriating book because you'll just be like, oh my gosh, why are we not, like, women are not included in, like, since 1990s is when women started being included in more medical research. Most medical research for products for women are not tested on women because of hormone changes and things like that. But if that product is going to be designed for women, then that needs to be taken into account. So again, it's a whole lot of information that will infuriate you, guaranteed, but it was very informative and a great book. I think I gave it 4 stars. Another book that will irritate you that I also did on audio is The Radium Girls, and that is by Kate Moore. So once upon a time, once we discovered radium, it was advertised as a health cure. Now we know, especially Madame Curie, right, that it is very dangerous to handle. And so the Radium Girls is the story of the young women who would paint radium onto the dials of watches. And throughout the whole book, true story, again, this is nonfiction section, you'll hear lip, dip, swish. So they would, because it's fine handles, they would have to like make sure they were supposed to be using like water that was next to them. However, to get paid and to do the amount that you needed to do is just faster to put it in your lip. And then they started having all of these health problems. And the story of the Radium Girls that Kate Moore writes about is not only about the life and why they have these jobs and where these jobs came from, but the issues that come with them, especially health-wise, and how they fought to get their health covered by the company that ended up causing it for them. And there's 2 groups of girls, and this is where it was a little bit confusing for me, because you see one group of girls and they start having health problems, and then the company moves because they know that there's an issue, and then there's a whole second set of girls where they also start having health problems. And I will say, if you are grossed out by health issues, especially stuff that has to do with the jaws and teeth and things like that, this will not be the book for you. But it is one of those things where a new product comes out, oh, it's super healthy for you, and then it ends up causing so much damage, and then it's kind of swept under the rug. And we have these women to thank for all of the information that we have on the health and the problems it caused for radium. And so it talks about the court case. They do win. However, some of them die. And the whole court thing where they wanted to delay it because some of them would die is horrendous and disgusting. So Again, it's one of those books where you're like gonna get mad when you read it. One that you might not get mad, but is sad, is the last of the nonfiction, and it is Chelsea Devante's I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, and this is her memoir book. She has a podcast. She is a TV writer, comedian. Sometimes she's in stuff too, but she's probably best known for Glamorous Trash. It used to be the Celebrity Book Club memoir. If you're into celebrity memoirs, especially female memoirs, definitely check it out. She does a whole bunch of other pop culture things now as well, but she talks about growing up a little bit more on the poverty side, and then some of the domestic violence that her mother had, and then Chelsea Devantes will also have, she will be assaulted. There's a whole chapter in there that is like blacked out, most of it, because she is talking about her own personal assault. And the people that did her book, the lawyers and stuff, said that she couldn't print that chapter, although it is documented, and so she kept it in, but had to black stuff out, which, good for you, Chelsea, because that man definitely should have been named. But she talks a lot about female influences in our lives, which is a huge theme of the podcast, and she talks about female friendships breaking up and how she got into the career that she has. So I love her podcast. I'm a cookie, and so it's her followers, and I really enjoyed reading her book, and I do recommend it. This is the banned book section. Now, I do get most of my information about banned books from PEN America. Most of these talking about are from Florida. PEN America is a great resource for banned books. I do have a whole like spreadsheet that they have that I go through to read the books. I read a lot of banned books, I always have, but now I have a list, so it makes it a little easier. I have 5 books to talk about, and some of them blew my mind. Again, why these books are being banned. It definitely shows that the people that are trying to ban them did not read them. Some of them I'll say probably why, and some of them you can kind of tell why, but there's a mixture of fiction and nonfiction in here. And so we're going to start with the nonfiction. The first book I'm going to talk about is called Beyond Magenta, and this is by Susan Cucklin. This I got on ebook through my library, and it is a story about 6 transgender youths, and they talk about their childhood, and they talk about their transitions and kind of how people in their life have supported them or not have supported them. If you do not know any transgender people, this is an excellent book to get introduced to the world of transgender people. They are out there, like 1% of our population in the United States. I have met several of them. I have never had an issue with anyone who is transgender. So I've heard some personal stories from the people in my life who I love, but I think it's a great resource for especially what a hot topic it is to get to know some of these people personally. They do share some information and not a lot. This is, again, more youth oriented, and so we don't see the full transition on as they grow up later in life. So it's a good snapshot, and it is their words. I think Cucklin's interviewing skills with them were great. So again, it is a great resource, especially if you're kind of curious. Definitely check it out. Another book that is kind of on the same reason why it's probably banned. Again, you have transgenders, that hot button issue. For some people, you know, it's the Florida has the Don't Say Gay, is This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. And this is a book about sex. It talks about sexuality, it talks about sex itself, it talks about male and female parts and things like that, and a little bit of gay culture, not all gay culture. The issue I had with this book, the way that it is written and the language that's used is directed for a younger audience. I'm talking like preteen, teenager. Then part of the book goes into meeting people on Grindr, which definitely is for a little bit of an older teenage, young adult audience. So I was confused on who this was directed to. There is a lot of gaps in our sexual education system. Actually, I wrote my master's thesis in education on it, so I do know where all of those gaps are. And I will tell you, as a teacher, who's someone who had to teach sex education, kids have questions. And a lot of those questions aren't answered. And now that kids have access to the internet at any time, they are asking the internet. So having resources like this is important because it is geared towards more factual information than just Google AI. So while I appreciate what Juno was trying to do, I felt like the delivery was not great, and the way that the language is used in it was so annoying to me. It's like, oh my God. And it was on audio, so I got really frustrated really fast of like, what am I reading and who is this audience for? But it does have some good information. Again, meeting men on Grindr. There's some good information on like how to do it safely. That's important. But that is I think for an older audience than what the language of the book was originally for. So I was a little confused with that. The last of the nonfiction was the Indigenous Peoples History of the U.S., and this is by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. Now, last video I talked about the African American women's People's History of the U.S., and I love that book, and so I was so excited. There's a whole series of it, like disabled Americans and things like that, and so I'm like I want to read more of them. And then I read this one, and it was really disappointing. I read a lot about Native American and Indigenous people. I read it in my fiction, nonfiction. I think it's really important, and we don't learn enough about them in school. So I take it upon myself to educate myself. I was really disappointed in this because I think I had the expectation that it was going to be like the Black Women's Book, where they looked at U.S. history through the perspective of the Indigenous people, and I would learn more about the different nation, tribes, and people themselves. I had just read like Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, where it talks specifically about a lot of well-known Indigenous, more men than women, unfortunately, but this was not that book, at least not at the 2/3 of it. 2/3 of it was talking about the way that white people looked at Indigenous people, and I think I learned more about the writer of The Last of the Mohicans than any other actual Native American in this whole entire book. So it was really disappointing. I really had hoped that she would have focused more on the Native perspective, and you do get that, but it's not until like 2/3 of the way through the book. So I was disappointed for a long time. I still think I'm going to continue the series of books. Not all of them have been banned, but definitely the African American women has been, and this one as well. So I'm not quite sure why this one is. I think it has to do with people's perspective that, patriotism should only be taught in school. But there's a lot of people that have looked at what we have done, especially to the Native population, and said, like, that's not right. We shouldn't have done that, and let's try to fix it. Unfortunately, we're still having that fight today because they're still losing their land and a whole bunch of other problems. But that is for you to educate yourself on. The 2 fiction books on this list, I'm still confused as to why they're banned. Maybe you could help me out a little bit. I did try to look it up, and the information did not make sense at all. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Fable by Adrienne Young. I've read Adrienne Young before. She writes adult stories as well as young adult. Fable is technically young adult. It is about a young girl. Her name is Fable, and she is kind of stranded on this island. She has this special ability that she can find where like gemstones are in the water, which helps her then escape the island. There is a really and I think might be why it's considered banned. When she tries to get off the island, it's because her life's in danger. The other men on the island who also mine rocks or gems for money, they're trying to steal her stuff, and they're gonna get rid of her as well. And it's a little scary at the beginning. She does end up being in a little bit of a romantic situation as well, and there's a hookup in that, but it's not that graphic. So those are the only 2 reasons why. I've read Adrienne Young before. I liked her other books better than this one. I heard the prequel about her mother is better but I don't know. All right, the last book is Ban This Book by Alan Gratz. I've read some other Alan Gratz. He wrote like Refugee, which I think is a really excellent young adult book. This is a fiction book about book banning, and it's a banned book. So if you actually got to the end of the book, you would realize that Gratz is talking about and explaining to kids why some books are banned. Like why people may ban books and like what you can do about it. And like it's definitely, his message is to talk to your parents and have that conversation with your parents about what books are appropriate and what books are inappropriate. Like that's his message, and that they were like, no, can't have that. The story is about a young girl who finds out her favorite book is going to be challenged or banned from the library, so it gets pulled from the shelf. She can't check it out. Then she's like, well, what other books are there? So she finds a list. It is one parent that is going to challenge these books, which, you know, is what we're seeing across the country, is that there is a small group of people who are trying to get these books removed from public libraries, not just school libraries. And she decides to take those books, and she purchases them and she puts them in her library, and she has her own banned book library checkout system. And so, because she wants to share it with other people, and so more people get involved. They have different books at their house that are on that banned book list, and so she ends up getting the school to read and read and read, and then she gets in trouble, which really irritated me. The fact that her parents were not great and not supportive of her. It gets a little better towards the end, but she's got younger siblings, and so as the oldest child, she's in elementary school. She also gets neglected quite a bit, and her younger sister, who does ballet, ends up being a little bit more important in her eyes of her parents. And so I was disappointed in the parent characters, but it was a great book. I gave it 4 stars. The parents really kind of pissed me off, which is why it was 4 stars instead of 5. But to have a book about book banning be banned, I think some of his other books have been banned too, but he's a great writer, especially for young kids. He writes for young kids. Like, we're talking older elementary and middle school age. So, you know, go figure. All right, the last set of books that I'm going to talk about, they're all fiction. They range in genre a little bit. I read a lot of fantasy. I'm finding, like, as I'm doing more and more of these videos and I have to look at the types of books that I read, I probably read more fantasy than just regular fiction. So I'm not a huge like romance reader, but I do have a romance book in here. Let's start with The Spellshop. The Spellshop is by Sarah Beth Durst. I got this one on audio through my library. It has the cutest cover. It's supposed to be like cozy fantasy. I was really bored. Yeah, so the library is on fire. There's a turmoil in the city, and so our protagonist has to leave. She's the librarian, so she takes books with her, and she's going to go to a cabin that her parents used to own on an island far away. She does have a friend with her. Her friend is a plant that is now sentient, and that plant was the best character of the whole book. There is a romance. It is kind of slow burn. It was really frustrating, the fact that you know pretty early on that they both like each other and they're getting in their own way. Like, that to me, just have a conversation as a grown-up. That's what we do. And yeah, it was okay. Like, I was kind of hoping it to be a little better. I guess, like, I've read a couple of cozy fantasies, and the whole slow burn, like, there are some, like, major issues that come up, but to me, the major issue was that they were just getting in their own way, so it was not for me. The romance, though, book that I read is the Viscount Who Loved Me, and this is Julia Quinn. This is the second book in the Bridgerton series. I read the first book. I've watched the series, and I read the first book to be like, oh, how's it different? And so I wasn't going to continue the series, and then the Colin Penelope season, like, really made me mad, so I was like, I'm going to read the book. But they're the 4th book in the series, and so the next season is the 3rd book, and so I feel like I have to wait But I will get there eventually, and you can hear my diatribe of Colin and Penelope. But book 2 and season 2, this is about Anthony and Kate. I surprisingly liked this storyline better than the show. The show where he's going to marry Kate's sister, and they get almost to the end of the aisle before they both realize, like, that's a bad idea. And then he ends up with Kate. Like, you were going to marry her sister. I'm not okay with that at all. And so in this one, he does court her, but they don't get anywhere close. So I appreciated that a whole lot better. It's still, like, romance is not really my thing. So I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. I liked it better than the show, but yeah, you know. I read another one in a series, and this is Dan Brown's Inferno. This is the 4th book of the Robert Langdon series. I read it because it was set in Italy. I have read the 3 prior. The first, I think everyone should read The Da Vinci Code. It's one of those books that I think, you know, it's fun, like fiction, and you don't have to think a whole lot about it. Langdon definitely didn't think a whole lot about it because he is so trusting in this book. I'm like, sir, you have had 3 previous books that everyone who could screw you over does screw you over. Stop being so trusting of strangers. But no, he's at it again. This one does have to do, hence the name Inferno, does have to do with Dante's The Divine Comedy. It does have to do with multiple books instead of just the first one. But it's set in Florence, which I love me some Italy. And so I liked the twist, but I got bored. I got so bored. And then I got so mad at Langdon for trusting everyone. He does have a little bit of amnesia. For someone who has like a photographic memory, him not being able to remember what happened before is a little frustrating for him, but it was all right. Like, I didn't think I was going to continue the Langdon series, and then it became available, and so I ran with it. And I'm not mad that I read it, but I could have gone without reading it too. And one book that I also could not. I went to my little neighborhood, like, local library box thing that you see in parks in front of people's houses, and I found The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. A lot of people really, really love this book. I know a lot of people have read all of his books. He definitely has a niche that he writes for. So from what I've heard is that, you know, he struggles with depression, and so a lot of his books are about that as well. This is no exception. And it was okay. I do have some suggestions, but I also didn't write it, so I really can't back him on that. But Nora Seed is our main character. Her cat dies, she gets fired, and so she decides this life is not for her anymore. That is your trigger warning if you are interested in what it was about. So when she does attempt to do that, she ends up at the Midnight Library. And so other people have done this as well, because you meet other characters who are in similar situations as her. And it's not always a library, but for her, she loves books. She was a philosophy major. And so she ends up in a library, and she gets the Book of Regret. And so the Book of Regret is every decision that you do not make. So if you are going to work one day and you go right instead of left, you could then say your regret is that you didn't go left. You can go back into that life and, like, relive it to find out if that's the life that you want to live. The thing with the cat was so sad. She tries to save her cat, and it does not work because that cat was just fated to not be about. And so that happens really, really early in the book. It's like the first thing that she does, and so that's not really a spoiler, but yeah, she relives, you know, hundreds and thousands of lives and decisions that she could have made. The thing that I didn't like is that she just kind of, like, is put in there. So she used to be in an Olympic training swimmer, and so she's like, well, what if I chose not to stop swimming? And she gets, like, popped in that life. She has no recollection of what happened from that decision to the current state that she's at, and so she's got to kind of play along. And this happens in, like, every life where she's like, oh, we had a conversation. What conversation? What did we talk about? And that is really frustrating because everyone's looking at her like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Like, we just had this conversation. Don't you remember where you're supposed to go, where you live? So she uses her phone a lot. So that part of the story I didn't like. She does find a life where she gets to stay in for a little bit longer, and she realizes the longer she stays, the more those memories come back to her, which, thank you, Hig, at the end of the book for adding that in there, because I was like, what if you choose this life and you don't remember anything that happened, especially in a couple of them she has kids, and like not remembering, you know, birthdays or anything for them. I was like, that's so tragic. But it's got a really sweet message. I think it's important, especially there's so many people who deal with these types of emotions, and there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I really regret this in life. I don't have that same feeling. So I'm sorry if you do, but I feel like, you know, the choices that we make are the choices that we make. And so, like, you could go right or left, you could have a sliding door moment, but so it didn't speak to me in that way. I don't, you know, that's just my thought process. So the last book that I'm talking about is also a library type books, and it was a suggestion by Mr. Teeth 989. So they suggested The Book That Wouldn't Burn, and that is by Mark Lawrence. Thank you for suggesting it, because I had never heard of it, and I definitely put it on the list. It became available. I did this one on audio as well. I will have to say it is 22 hours long, which is a really, really long commitment. I was also traveling when I was listening to this, so I did miss portions of it because I was trying to get through it a little faster. But wow, what an epic book. If you like things like Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, just like books that have really detailed world building, this is a fantastic book. It is two protagonists. They are in like different parts of the library. There's this really big library, and they're each kind of going on their own adventures. One of them is stuck in the library, and so he can't get out. So he's trying to leave, and the other one is a female character, and she, her home was destroyed, and so she was brought to the city, and she was kind of like, this is your job. You're working in the library now. So she's learning things through the library. And then we also have different time periods that happen as well, because you go through certain doors in this library, and all of a sudden you're in a different time period. And the people that you see, some of them do see you, some of them don't, depending on your timeline. And both of these characters then are trying to learn, like, how do we navigate? What are the rules of this? So you're learning along with them. Again, epic world building. It is a lot of a story, though. It is a little bit of a commitment. So that's just the warning there. But if you're someone who read Wheel of Time, those books are massive as well, each one. And so you kind of know what you're getting into. But thanks for the recommendation. Keep them coming. If you have a book that you would like to recommend, go ahead and put it down below, and I will put it on the list.